thanks everyone for being here tonight. My name is Rory. I'm going to be kind of kicking things off with an introduction, but basically, welcome everyone. We're kind of here for this alumni panel to do two things. First, we're going to work through some dedicated topics via a moderated conversation that'll actually cover the first half hour that we have together. And then second, we're here to be a resource for you students. We figured the best way to do that is to actually dedicate the second half of our hour together tonight to a kind of casual Q&A where you attendees can ask us anything you like, either to one person in particular or to us as a group to tackle. So without further ado, I'm going to give a brief introduction of each member of our panel, and then we can kind of jump right in. First is David Bock. He's a 2019 University of Minnesota grad. He works at Piper Sandler as an IB analyst on the technology team, the medical technology team. Second is Eric Shao. He's a Northwestern mathematics grad. He's currently at Goldman Sachs as an analyst on the equity synthetics trading team in New York. Holly is a Berkeley graduate, just like myself, and she's a treasury analyst at Bank of America. And then lastly, for the young alumni is me, Rory. I'm also a Berkeley grad, and I work at a machine learning hedge fund called Volion on their trading team. So we actually have a special treat tonight, because that's not all. We have Skylar, who's a VP from Goldman's healthcare investment banking team. And although she's not a SOF alumni herself, she actually sits on the SOF associate board, and she'll be moderating us young SOF alumni tonight. So Skylar, I'll let you take it from here and kind of ask some questions as we go through.
Great, absolutely. Thanks so much, Rory. It's great to virtually see everyone tonight. Thank you guys for joining. So we can just jump right into it. To start, to ask the full panelists, maybe each of you could go around and say, what is the most helpful thing that you learned in college or developed in college that prepared you for the early stages of your career? Rory, maybe you want to start?
Yeah, I'd love to. I think that's a tough question because there's a lot of things in college that translate over. I think the thing that actually solidified stuff for me was kind of like ways of thinking. This is going to sound super vague and abstract, but basically having someone tell you, hey, this thing is really, really hard to do. Just go figure out how to do it, whether that was in an advanced math class, like write this essay about this topic. That was actually the single thing that really applied after school for me, because in startup land, you have to just like pick up problems and solve them, and you need to just figure out how to do that. You need to get extremely good at Googling, and then like I almost call it second level Googling, where it's like you have to figure out the stuff behind the actual thing, like the actual research that's going to make all your code tie together. It's going to make the product actually kind of good. I would say that kind of way of thinking, that like being able to see a problem and just go and step forward and actually solve it, that's like the single thing that probably has helped me the most, that I picked up in college, because people would just give you assignments or you'd be doing something for a club and you would just have to figure out how to do it. So that was probably the thing that translates the most over.
Holly, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think for me, it was finding like intellectual curiosity, or just like curiosity in general. And this is the SOF value, I think. Yeah. It's kind of along the lines of what Rory was saying, but just like having curiosity in everything you do, whether it's professional related, or it's like in your own personal development, really helps in not only just like being good at what you do and becoming a like true specialist, subject matter expert in what you do at work, but also it just makes you like more interesting person too. I feel like you learn and pick up on these like weird facts or just weird ideas that are cool to discuss and talk about.
David, you want to go next?
Yeah, so actually kind of building off of that, but in a less intellectual sense. I thought socializing in college and getting to know my peers and what they were interested in is really, really valuable, because you never know what those people are going to go on and do next. And that's why, networking, not just with, executives and people who are several steps ahead of you in their careers is important, but with your peers too, because they might have something really cool that they're going to be working on 2, 3, 5 years down the road. So I think that's in the way that kind of weaves in with kind of the intellectual curiosity that Holly was just speaking about is when you do have free time outside of your job, depending on what you do, you might have more or less of it, but you're going to want to try to do things that aren't work related too. And you're going to want to have a broad network of people who can, show you how to do this or that, or teach you how to golf or go on a ski trip with you or something like that. And so that's where, once you're out of college and you're in the working world, you got to make time to have fun and do that sort of thing too. So the socializing in college taught me a lot of useful things for work life, but also just living life.
Thanks. And last, Eric?
Yeah, I think for me, like, having a lot of things on your plate in college was like, I think a good way to get used to just having a lot of things on your plate, like after college, like clubs, extracurriculars, classes, and trying to balance the social life with that. I think is kind of a similar balancing act after college as well. Like you have your things you're interested in outside of work, you have your work, you have your hobbies that you enjoy as well. And I think it's a similar exercise to like think about the things you enjoy doing, and think about like what you want to be doing as well, and kind of planning around where you're at now and kind of where you want to go. So I think it's kind of pretty similar in that sense as college.
Thanks. Maybe David and Eric, you guys both just touched on this. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit more. How do you adjust to the routine and the rigor of work life, having gone from being a college student, having a lot of freedom, having free time, to now being, having to be on the desk and having to be available? I know as, when I was a first year analyst, it's really hard to balance that. What are some tips that have made it useful for you to navigate that adjustment?
I can jump in really quick. I think going off of what Eric just mentioned, I totally endorse the strategy of being involved in as much as you can in college, because it builds that multitasking muscle. And that definitely proves useful for work. Even though you might have just one job, that job's going to pull you in a lot of directions, regardless of what that job is. There are a lot of people to please. You obviously want to please everyone and make a good impression, especially when you're early on in your career. And so, yeah, practice is helpful, but it doesn't necessarily mean when you get there and you think you know what you're going to expect, it never turns out that way. I would personally say, and Skylar, maybe you can relate to this, but the hardest part about banking isn't the hours, it's actually the unpredictability of the hours, in my experience. And, kind of just being able to go with the flow, and you want to have hobbies that can fill little cracks and holes in your time, but might not necessarily mean that you get a whole day a week to yourself or something like that. And so being flexible, I think, is the most valuable trait that I've found for being able to adapt to the working life after college.
Great, thanks. And on a different note, how do you guys navigate working with more senior employees in your team, working with managers, maybe with, just peers that are of, a different generation? Maybe Holly, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so right now I'm working on PPP, and so PPP being the Paycheck Protection Program. So I'm getting to know like a whole different group of people, and there are definitely a lot of seniors who are involved because it's kind of a big part of what the bank is doing right now. And I think what's helpful is when you get to first know like someone who's pretty senior, is just to like talk to them about how they got to where they are today. Like hearing about their progression and their journey in their career reminds you that they were also once like where you were. And it's like, it's kind of grounding, and it helps you remember that they're actually like, they were once college students that just graduated and may or may not have known what they wanted to do with their life.
Great. Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I always tell people my best advice is people love talking about themselves. So that's usually a great way to start a relationship, is just getting to know them. Rory, maybe you could elaborate, since I think your path is a little different than what people typically expect when they think about finance. How has your journey changed, or your perspective of what you assumed your career would be coming out of school changed since undergrad?
Well, it certainly changed a lot. Like, I never thought I would live in Chicago. That was like one thing that's definitely changed. And also, just in case you're wondering, I'm kind of a Cubs fan. It's actually mandated if you live in Chicago for more than a year, you have to support one of the sports teams here. So that's why I have this. But to answer your kind of question more directly, like, I was always attracted to just like weird financial products, and I just kind of like the analogy I give is that it started out as like a thread. I like was a private wealth management like intern, and I was like structured products are crazy, and then I started like kind of pulling on that, and I ended up working at an options trading firm in Chicago, and then after that I worked at like a small hedge fund in Marin County in California, and that was also doing option stuff. After I graduated, I shifted into this like derivatives product robo advisor space on the startup side, specifically on the technology side, and it was all just thematically related to like derivative products. And that's actually the kind of arc that I followed. In terms of like what I thought my career was going to look like, I didn't have a clue, and I sort of still don't. And now that I ended up at the trading team that I'm at, we actually still do trade a lot of derivative products, and thematically I've just kind of like followed that rope. And I would say, just to cap it off, the two benefits of that is, one is I end up being really interested in what I'm talking about, and then two, that actually shines through when you talk to other people, when it's like, oh, it's very clear that this person is interested in options and they're not just like trying to get a job or something.
Great, thanks. And Eric, maybe you could comment on, what do you do to stay on top of developing your skills on an ongoing basis, both in terms of kind of a professional work-related skills, as well as kind of networking and more social intelligence types of skills? What are some tips that you have for us on how you manage that?
I think for me, like, my managers were really supportive about, setting time every single week on my calendar, just because it's really hard to ask like questions that take longer to answer, things that require more background, during the day. And if something comes up like during the day, sometimes it's just not a good time to ask that question if they're busy or something's going on. So I have like a 30-minute time with every single person on my team. My team's pretty small. It's only like 4 people, but having that time really lets me like ask them questions I have about work. It helps me develop a personal relationship with people on my team. And I think really like having set times on people's calendars is really important, because I think like as much as spontaneous, like, hey, I have a question, or hey, do you want to get coffee, are great ways to get to know people, I think also like really setting something down concrete is, it takes, you have the full attention, and it's just, I think, a lot more productive to either learn what they're doing, like learn about their interests, or just be able to talk about and get to know people as well.
I think that's great advice. I fully support asking for feedback early and often, and definitely making time, forcing people to kind of step away from the desk and give you that advice. Because as much as we say we love, people, you assume people will give you feedback, as you're going on the job. It's actually really hard. And as I've gotten more senior and manage more junior people, it is harder than you think, especially when you're good friends with people that you work with. But when you first start, it can almost be, a full year before you get a formal review. So making sure you have those check-ins and getting feedback and that you're developing early on is really important. So I think that's great advice. Maybe a question for all of you. What is one of the most challenging things that you didn't expect coming into the work life? Maybe Holly, do you want to start?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest challenges for me personally was learning to work with ambiguity. I knew it was a thing, and I knew it was a skill that I definitely should have learned in college, but I feel like, at least for my major, a lot of the projects or assignments that I worked on were pretty set up for me. And I just kind of had to like execute what I learned in class and in lectures. But when it comes to working, I think there's a lot of ambiguity and there's a lot of different ways that you can approach a problem. There isn't always the right answer or one right answer. There can be many different ways you can approach a problem. So working with ambiguity is definitely one thing that I had to learn to grasp and really work well with.
Great. David, how about you?
Probably not benchmarking myself against my peers. And the reason I say that is just because you come in with a class of folks, and like I remember the first couple weeks during training, you know, we'd have exercises, and you know, some people would just fly through them because they had been working on finance stuff all of college, and some people went to liberal arts schools, and so they couldn't read a balance sheet when they showed up at training, and I just remember people would. Some people would finish, get up, and they just leave the room, or they'd go stand in the back and talk, and other people were kind of struggling along with it. And that didn't necessarily just end with training. I sat next to a guy, really smart guy, but he had never touched finance before he actually started the job. And so, you know, I spent a lot of time working with him, and I was a finance undergrad. And I spent a whole lot of time working with him on different things. And, you know, there were plenty of instances where he asked a question that I thought, like, why are you asking that? That's such a silly question. That's so basic. And then in trying to explain it to him, trying to learn from what maybe he hadn't spent much time with so far, I learned and understood something better. So to benchmark yourself against peers, or to group yourself in a different group than your peers when you start, even if you think you might be good at what you're doing, I would just caution that. That's one piece of advice I have starting out.
That is very good advice, and yeah, definitely very hard to break away from. Rory, how about you?
Yeah, this might be a broader point that doesn't directly apply to work, but life kind of flip-flopped from an opt-out system where it's like I'd run into my friends and be like, oh, are you doing this thing today? Like, do you want to come to this club meeting? Do you want to, like, you know, do this thing? And like I would have to like say no to stuff. To now, life is very much so an opt-in system, in the sense that if I want to do something, if I want to have a like fun event happen, I have to say, like, I have to go and make it happen. And I've found that happens both in work and my social life. Like, if I want to catch up with my friends, who the majority are in California still, I have to like reach out and shoot that text message like, hey, do you want to catch up this week? And at work, it's like, if you want to see something happen, you basically have to say, hey, can I make this happen, right? Can you do this extra thing? There's not a lot of the opt-out stuff where it's like you're going to have so many people wanting to hang out with you all the time that you'll have to say no to all these things that are going on. And to be honest, that's probably made worse by the pandemic, in the sense that there's not a lot going on. But broadly speaking, dealing with that kind of flip-flop has been like an interesting thing for me, at least.
Definitely don't think the pandemic is helping that, but I think that is a very real thing that changes. So enjoy college while it lasts, because I promise you it's downhill after that. Eric, how about you? Any surprising challenges?
Yeah, I think for me, like, the hardest part was just like every single day being a very similar schedule. Like college, you have, you know, your Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes, you have your Tuesday, Thursday classes, your days are extremely varied, and you have a lot of say in what you do and what you spend your time on, you know. Whereas after college, I think like it's a lot more structured. You know, I don't have different alarms for different days anymore, and I think a lot of my days are on a pretty similar schedule. And so, like, I think that is a big transition from previous times, and I think some people might enjoy the more rigid structure, and I think other people who want that variety may find it a little more difficult. But I think especially now, like when I'm working from home, or a lot of the days can seem very similar to each other, and maybe that's just like an artifact of COVID. But for me, that was a big challenge transitioning.
That's very valid. On that point, is there anything that you wish you had done in college that could have prepared you better, or just conversely something you wish you had spent more time on, or anything like that? David, maybe you want to go first?
That's a good question. I don't think I have a good answer. This is a really lame answer, but I think I'd probably go and do the same things. I'd probably sleep less. I had a great sleep schedule in college, but I should have tried to fit more in, because it would have been awesome to, join another group or something like that. And I think I got my 8 hours almost every night. I never pulled an all-nighter in college. That's another thing that changed in the working world. So I don't know that I would change a whole lot. I just try to do more of everything that I did.
You were really just banking sleep to get ready for all of the all-nighters that you now have to pull. Holly, is there anything you would have done differently?
I think everyone who's graduated from college will say this, and it's what I'm going to say is kind of similar to what David said. I just like not take the 4 years for granted. Like looking back, I'm always like, there's no way I can bring back those 4 years or be in a situation where people of similar age, of similar values are going to be on the same campus within the same physical vicinity. And so I just wish I said no less often, and experience more of college. Really general answer, but yeah.
I think those are valid. Whenever anyone asks me that, I would say do more of what you actually want to do. I would, for everyone who's on the call, I know it's really tempting that you should be in the finance club and manage your investment portfolio or whatever it is that maybe you think will help you get into finance. If you truly enjoy those things, which hopefully you do to some extent if you're planning on going into the finance industry, if you truly love the finance club, by all means join the finance club. But don't do those things because you think it's what you have to do the job. Join the dance club, join the sports team, join intramural frisbee, join the Quidditch club, whatever it is that you want to do. Spend more time doing that, because that stuff goes away. The finance will always be there. And then, so maybe kind of to round it out, and bring it back to Scholars of Finance and the values that we're trying to uphold and instill in ourselves, are there any guiding principles that you sort of live by that keep you grounded and keep you focused in the day-to-day? Eric, maybe you want to go first?
Yeah, I think for me, the principles of I think for me, a big thing that comes up quite a bit is just making sure that you're staying honest and staying true to yourself and your team. I think there's a lot of times where there's a questionable situation, you're maybe you make a mistake and you're will this mistake go unnoticed? Should I tell someone about this mistake? Or should I just try to fix it myself and maybe hopefully no one will notice? And I think really trying to think about and be true to the things that people have always belabored are extremely important, because I think at the end of the day you're kind of, what people think of you is the most important thing. And if people don't think they can trust you, or they're not really sure that what you're saying can be taken at face value, I think is extremely difficult. So I think for me, that's the most important thing is honesty and having good character.
That's great. Rory, how about you?
Yeah, really, to build off what Eric said, it is nuts how much having high integrity matters. That is, if I were to pick one thing that is a guiding principle, that's the thing to focus on, is if you walk into a room and someone doesn't trust you, like it's over. Like that's not gonna end well. Nothing's gonna go right there. But if you have built up a reputation that you're a trustable character, if you've built up this kind of history of like doing the right thing consistently, it's only when you look back after 4 years and realize like, man, I like don't lie to people about things. I like, when I make a mistake, I own up to it immediately. These kinds of things, that's like actually what will really get you a good reputation. It'll make introductions happen that you never would have imagined, and all these kind of like unknown positives end up really just coming out of the woodwork.
Great. David?
Rory took the words right out of my mouth. I think integrity is kind of the number one. I just navigated to the SOF website, and it is top left for a reason. The integrity being that value. It's also the top of the list. I have a list actually right here above my computer screen of my personal values that I developed back when I did the leadership development program as an undergrad, and integrity is the top of that list too. If you do what you mean, you say what you do. Sorry, if you say you're going to do something, do it, and say what you mean. And if you continue doing that and build a reputation, then nothing's going to stand in your way.
Holly, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I think integrity is like super important when you're working. I mean, it's always important, but even more so for me. Like I've noticed there's many opportunities to cut corners or to kind of take the easy way out, and for what I'm currently doing, it could like cost a business their paycheck protection program money, which could mean that the business could go under. And so just making sure that sticking to like your core values, specifically integrity, is really important.
Great. Yeah, I completely agree with everyone. And maybe a slightly different answer to that question. I would say one of the things that surprised me the most, or I've been trying to develop as I've been out of school, is you really have to parent yourself and I mean that in every way. You need to take care of yourself. You need to know your boundaries. You need to check yourself and make sure you're doing the right thing and you're upholding your own personal values. And you really have to now consciously think about these things. Whereas I think, when we're younger, we have our parents to keep us in line, but now you have to keep yourself in line. And that means everything from staying healthy physically and mentally to doing the right thing and telling the truth and fessing up when you make a mistake and upholding these values and everything that, Holly, Eric, David, and Rory have said. So I think that that's all really important and hopefully what everyone on this phone and part of this organization is all about. On that, Rory, maybe I will toss it back to you to start with some Q&A.
Yeah, so thanks, Skylar, for moderating. That was great. This part is for all of you students. Like, we're here to answer any questions you might have, anything that we haven't touched on, anything either specifically directed at one of us or that you just want to get our thoughts on that's a topic you feel we haven't covered. This is the time to ask those questions and get those subjects out in the open. So please, you can raise your hand with the little Zoom thing, or if you have a video, you could raise it on the video as well. That might be more fun for you. And then I think we'll probably just call on you from there.
Yeah, and feel free to just jump in too, kind of like I am doing right now. But don't have a question, but just wanted to bring up a point that David brought up. I know all of you that are sitting on the panel right now, you don't have a lot of free time. And as David mentioned, you have to just find little nooks and crannies of hobbies to do and different things to fill the time that is your free time. So I appreciate that all of you took this hour of your free time to spend with all of us and just answer questions that we have. So thanks for being here. Looks like Drashti and Rishi both have questions.
Yeah, Drashti, I think I saw your hand first, and then we can go to Rishi after that.
All right, thank you. Thank you all of you guys for being here. I had a question about, like, again, the college journey. What tips do you have about, like, for like career exploration purposes in finance in particular? Like, how did you like land on your first job after undergrad, and what led you to that?
I can go first. So when I was first trying to find internships for my junior summer, I just kind of talked to some of my friends' parents who worked at larger companies because I knew I wanted to start out at a larger company. Just got to know what they did. And then for me, like B of A really stood out because they had great culture. That was one of the main things that my friend's mother had like mentioned about working at B of A. And so I knew that I wanted to work at B of A. And then I just kind of followed the traditional path of going from internship to full-time. But I think definitely leverage like some of your friends' parents' like jobs and some relationships, because I think they can talk firsthand about what it's like to work at a specific company or in a specific role.
Yeah, to add to that, I think leveraging your personal network that you already have is really good, but also as a student, you can just email people and they'll like want to talk to you. Like there's this weird magnetism that people in the workforce have to people who are like students, that you're like going to be hungry learners and all of these things, which I'm sure you all are. For example, the current job I have now, I emailed the person when I was a senior. I was like, "Hey Ben, I want to be an intern for Volion," and he was like, "We've never taken an intern before. We're not going to do that. But keep your technical skills sharp, and you can come maybe afterwards at interview." And then lo and behold, a year later, I reach out again, and he's like, and I'm to this day convinced that that's the reason that I like met the resume screen and all of this stuff, and now I work there. So if you just reach out to these people and email them, they're generally going to be on your team from the get go. So I would actually say just cold emailing, so long as it's personalized, is another good way.
I'd say to add onto Rory's, I totally support cold emailing. I can tell you I get a million of them. I would say the emails that I am most likely to respond to are ones that have some sort of personal connection. So whether it's an alum that went to my school, somebody who was in my same sorority, I was a college athlete, so if someone else was a college athlete, like anything that you can find that connects you to that person personally will make them more likely to talk to you. So if you don't have, if your parents or friends don't have a network, like use any club, any contact, anything, scour LinkedIn to just find some connection that you can make with a person, and that'll give you a much more likely chance to connect with them.
Okay, I think we had another question from Rishi.
Yeah, first of all, again, thanks to everyone for taking the time to speak with all of us. I'm sure we all really appreciate it. I wanted to ask, I know a couple of people touched on this already, but could you sort of expand on sort of an experience from being in Scholars of Finance that you've carried through to your career that you think has been like particularly important?
I can jump in on that. So quick background on me with Scholars of Finance. I didn't know what I wanted to do my freshman year of college. I was in the business program, but I think it was an accident. I wanted to be in economics, which is not actually in the business school at the University of Minnesota. But there was a posting for this symposium. And so I went to, it was the second symposium at that point. And I got to see, several executives up on stage talking about ethics and integrity in the finance world. And then I got to see Ross up there too. And after the event, I had such a great time meeting people and talking to people at the event. I went and I got coffee with Ryan Quinlivan, Ross's co-founder, then I think maybe a week or two after that. And I basically said, I don't know anything, but I'll try to do my best to help you guys out. And so for me, it was, and from that point on, they let me kind of tag along and be helpful where I could be. So I was involved as an undergrad for about 3 years then. And we put on different programs. We brainstormed different programs that could bring value to students. So we kind of did the first run through of the mentor program and then the leadership development program. And we started doing some smaller panels kind of like this or smaller speaker sessions. And setting those things up and building the community, getting to know like-minded students who had similar values and also were willing to put some effort in to bring whatever value they could to their fellow students, their peers. I found that to be really, really valuable. I stay in touch with folks who I met as an undergrad in Scholars of Finance. I obtained a lot of mentorship from Ross, Ryan, and other folks in Scholars of Finance. And to this day, Ross is still one of my best mentors. So, you know, it's the connections you build. It's the, not just with the executives who really, you know, that's what excited me and got me involved in Scholars of Finance in the first place, but kind of just working with the Scholars of Finance community, the people who have already kind of bought in, that really has just provided a ton of value. And I could go on and on about it, but is the community that Scholars of Finance builds that has had the biggest impact on me.
I can go next. So I think for me, it was writing my mission statement at the end of the LDP. Just like solidifying my true north and my values was very helpful going into work when like you get really busy and it's easy to forget those things. So that was definitely one main part of SOF that really impacted my career. And now it's like led me to be involved in like social committees, committees on social governments and environmental governments. And it's driven me to be a part of like a minority fintech incubator. So some really cool things. And yeah, that mission statement was very valuable to me.
And maybe one more thing I would add to that, which is a kind of different vector than Holly and David have touched on, is that Scholars of Finance will just make you think about financial things in a more ethical light. Certain questions that'll come up, and I won't go into any minutiae details on anything, but it is astonishing the times that you will come to some, you know, like very specific financial thing and be like, you know what, I actually think that's kind of messed up, and I don't think that's how it should be. And then being able to have those conversations intelligently, because of the background that Scholars of Finance is kind of given, is actually a really interesting and I think very rare quality to see every once in a while. And I think sometimes it catches people off guard, but in the most part, to say like, hey, I actually think this might not be aligning incentives in the way that we think it is, can be a really, really a cool experience to have. And it's only a framework that Scholars of Finance uniquely is able to give. And we have plenty of time for more questions. So if you're teetering on the edge of your seat, waiting to ask something, please do. This is definitely what we're here for. And really, we want to hear from you guys. All right, Mr. Menta.
All right. Well, thank you for speaking to us so far. I guess one interesting question I have is what have each of you found is the best way to like get people to like you in the workplace, or even if it's that, like, how does that differ from like getting to like build social connections with people, and then also building connections with people who want to like help you? So like kind of differing from a social versus like a mentorship relationship, or just overall, how do you get people to like you?
I have a quick thought on that. So the first part of the answer is it depends. It varies. No two people are exactly the same. So while talking about non-work things might get someone to like you a lot, maybe you know your boss's kid plays hockey. You know, being able to talk about what they do outside of work and their other interests, that might be something that you do more frequently with some coworkers because that's something they're interested in, and that's kind of part of who they are. Other folks, they are all 100% business, and you just need to keep putting top quality work product in front of them, and and make their lives easy, and then they'll like you for that. So you kind of have to test it out a little bit. You know, try ice-breaking conversations when you first start out in different ways, and see how people respond, and just try to kind of go off of that feedback. And to that point too, explicitly ask for feedback. And if you listen to people and you take their feedback and you truly do try to incorporate it into your actions, no one can fault you for that, and you've done everything you can to make them like you.
I also don't think it's, you know, too much, it's too different from, you know, getting people to, you know, getting on people's good sides, like outside of work. Like, I think it's the same idea of, you know, be genuinely interested in that person and what they're interested in. Like, if you can find what their passions are and you have similar ones, like, a lot of these people are people at the end of the day, and, you know, they have families and they have kids, and if you can, you know, be genuinely interested in these people, like, I think that's like the first step to like building a relationship. And I don't think that's exclusive to, you know, building relationships at work. I think that's like a general principle for getting to know someone, and I think like that follows through in here and or in the workplace. But I think, like, to caveat that, like, there definitely is a time and place to talk about personal life. Like, if it's, you know, first thing in the morning and someone's really busy, like, maybe not the best time, but I think, like, you know, just getting to know people personally, I think, is the best way.
Yeah, I think I'll add on that I feel like it's pretty obvious when you aren't genuinely interested in getting to know someone. Like, if you just go to them for something work related or ask for help, like, I think it's pretty important when you like first hop on a call, time permitting, like when you ask how are you and do those really basic introductions, that you actually ask deeper if they seem like they're in the mood for it. And then on the mentorship part, I was lucky enough to get paired with a senior mentor when I started working during my internship and full-time. And you'd be surprised by how much your senior mentor would want to advocate for you in whatever endeavors you have. And they are most of the time more than happy to connect you with people who will put you in the right direction.
Yeah, I guess I'd kind of add a touch to this all too. I actually think it's a fascinating question because when you're in college, you know, everyone you meet could basically be your buddy, right? Like, you meet someone in class and it's like, oh, we can do homework together. This is awesome, right? And then, you know, it's not weird if like one of the first like 5 minutes of knowing someone, you're like asking about their girlfriend or boyfriend or who they like, what fraternity or sorority, like whatever club they're part of, like all that's super cool. At work, that's not necessarily the case, right? Like, if you show up and you're asking someone about their personal life within 5 minutes, it might be really, really, really weird. So there is definitely a different dynamic. But I actually would kind of echo what David said here is like, those people are super professional. Those people just want good work. So just do good work. And then for the people who are a little bit, and I usually like test the waters with folks, I think having us prepared is always a helpful thing. For those people who are a little more social, you can generally tease that out quickly, and then it's pretty easy to like take a conversation offline and say, you know, like, hey, let's just like get to know each other for like 15 minutes. I am in the Zoom workforce, so I've actually never really been in like an office where I can like talk to people in that sense. But I think broadly speaking, the same principle would apply. If you can quickly tease out who's going to be like super professional and who's going to be a little bit more on the social side or the personal side, and then from there just kind of take it. Skylar, I'm actually curious from your perspective as a VP, what makes you like an analyst that you have?
I like people that I can trust. Frankly, that's my number one thing that I look for. And And that means trust with a task, trust to have my back, trust to tell me the truth. It's every meaning of the word. I think the people that are my closest friends in the workplace, truly, even if they may be an analyst and there may be, 5, 8, 10-year difference between us, are people who I know I have their back and they have mine. And we may not know anything about each other's personal lives. They're analysts, frankly, that I don't know that much about their personal lives, and they have no idea about mine. But I know if I called them and I said, like, hey, my parents are in town tonight, I'm having dinner with them, like, I need you to cover, they would say yes. And vice versa. If they called me and said that, like, I would say, absolutely, yeah, I got you, no problem. So those are the kinds of people that I like the most, that are kind of there for you no matter what, and that you can trust will have your back in any situation.
Makes sense. Like that answer. And then I think Kevin had his hand raised. That might have been a while ago, but if you have a question, go ahead.
Yeah, I did have a question. Yeah, so for all the panelists and also Skylar, all of you are working in different aspects of finance. Some of you in equity trading, some in IB, some in hedge funds, and etc. I was wondering, in each of your cases, what's the thing that drives you to do the work that you do? Like what's the thing that gets you out of bed each morning and gets you excited about the work that you do?
I wager we should probably all answer this one. I can dive in first. I just love derivative products, man. I have no idea how else to say it. I literally just think they're the coolest things in the world. I get to wake up and I get to like work with those. It's nuts. Like they're so cool. So that's the thing that excites me about it. And then also like the nitty, like I don't know. There was another song that alternately we're gonna play at the beginning of this, which is called Vacation. One of the lines from that song is like, "I love my occupation. Every day I'm on vacation." Like that's kind of how I feel. Like it's just so fun to dive into the nitty gritty of all these like different trading things, and it's so fun. And then also, frankly, like the people you work with will make or break like how much you love like whatever it is you're doing and working on. So I think between those two things, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning for market hours.
So for me right now, because I'm processing small business loans for COVID, for the CARES Act, I know that if I don't get out of bed and I don't finish my work by the end of the day, that could mean a small business could go under. So I have a pretty direct impact on like the ability of these small businesses to stay afloat. And then my BAU job works really closely with a lot of unemployment insurance programs. And so that was also stressed a lot during in the beginning when there were pandemic payments getting issued. And so knowing that if I didn't get my work done by the end of the day, that could mean that someone wasn't going to get their unemployment insurance money. So yeah.
I can go next. When I started off, I kind of knew like pretty quick. So I interned in banking, and as an intern, I kind of had made up my mind that, okay, I'll come back and I'll work there for 2 years, but I'm not going to be a career banker. So the first chunk of working it was, I want to learn as much as I can because I want to recruit for private equity. And I went through that process, and I am going to a private equity firm after this summer. But now I've built a good enough relationship with my team that I want to show up every day, and I want to continue doing good work so that I can finish strong. And I also recognize that I have a ton that I need to learn and be ready for by the time I do leave. So it's kind of like 2 years seems like a long time, but realizing I only have 4 months left, it's like, I don't know how I'm going to fit everything in that I want to do before I leave.
I guess for me, like, um, what really makes me interested in like my job being a trader, or just like what made me interested in general, was just like, I've always followed the news, and I've always been interested in current events and what's going on. And for me, it's just super interesting to see a headline and then immediately, feel, almost the burden of it. Like I can feel, clients coming in to trade on it, and I can feel like my workload picking up on large headlines. And for me, that's like super interesting, like to just, almost have like your pulse on what's going on. And like, that's, for me, it's really something cool to be a part of.
For me, it's the people on my team and the clients that I work with. One of the reasons why I went into investment banking and why I'm still in investment banking is because it's a client service job. And so I spend all of my time on the phone talking to clients, or on the phone talking to my teams. So that's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me here. That's what keeps me excited every day. I really, really miss going to the office because I really miss my coworkers. So that's my favorite.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, I think we have time for one or maybe two shorter questions. So Nicholas, I think you had your hand raised, so we'll take yours. And then if anyone else has a quick question, we can probably include both.
Perfect, thank you. Skylar, this question is geared toward you and your experience. I see that you began working in New York and you're currently in the UK, is that correct?
It is.
So, great, so I'm very interested in working in different countries. So my question for you is, how did you facilitate the transition from working domestically to working abroad? And in what ways do you think you made yourself desirable to companies internationally? And that is what separated you from others at the company who were working domestically?
I will do my best to answer that question, although my transition may not be the best. So I was working at Goldman in the New York office, and the opportunity came up and I was asked if I was interested in moving to London to take this position here in the healthcare group. So I don't know if I did anything specifically to position myself for that, other than making yourself really indispensable to the team and making yourself seem like somebody who is very adaptable in any situation. Which are some things I think I did a good job at. And when they asked if I was interested in making the move, those are some of the comments that they made, that they felt like I was somebody who could easily adjust and into a team where I didn't know anyone, a country where I didn't know anyone, work with clients that I had never met before. So putting yourself in situations in your current role where you are working with new people and taking on new tasks, I think is a good way to do it. And frankly, just expressing your interest. Depending on the type of role that you're in and what firm you're at, opportunities might come more often than others. If you're at a big, multinational firm, those transitions might be very easy to do within the company. Like I know at Goldman, we actually have formal mobility programs that are set up for people who want to go work abroad. And frankly, yeah, if you just raise your hand and say like, hey, I really want to go work in the Singapore office or the Brazil office or whatever it is, they'll facilitate those things as long as you're a top performer and you have support from your team. If you're at a smaller firm, obviously that becomes more challenging and you have to navigate that yourself and maybe find a different company who will sponsor you if you need a visa or whatever it is. But as I said, just showing that you're really adaptable is the key.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I would say that we have time for maybe one more question. So if anyone's teetering on the edge of their seat, this would be the time. So I'll guess without any desperate questions to be asked, we can actually kind of conclude here. So I'll just offer a few concluding remarks, and then there's one request from a particular Jake Kranz that we'll include as well. So first off, thanks to the panelists. If everybody could like unmute your mic and give a nice warm round of applause. It's so nice to have everybody here to give some like basically advice. So yeah, seriously, David, Holly, Skylar, Eric, awesome that you guys are here. Lastly, like, thank all of you students for coming and hanging out with us. It's good to be able to see some young faces, and hopefully you've gleaned something of interest from this particular meeting.